Before dawn on December 18th, Ukrainian drones hit a Russian fuel train near Dovzansk, disrupting logistics despite layered air defenses and electronic warfare.
Early morning, December 18th, southern Russia. Just after dawn, a freight corridor running toward a strategic rail junction comes back to life, its tracks carrying a long, slow-moving train loaded with fuel, spare parts, and sealed containers tied to rear-area military logistics. From the ground, it looks routine. Rail traffic never truly stops here. Schedules resume. Signals cycle green. Crews assume the night has passed without incident. Above the route, however, the approach has already begun. Ukrainian drones do not rush the target. They arrive gradually, spread across altitude and distance, advancing along pre-mapped corridors that follow terrain contours and avoid predictable radar lines. Instead of one wave, the system releases multiple platforms, slightly more than previous operations, adjusted upward to increase pressure without triggering immediate saturation alarms. Each drone holds a steady speed, low enough to blend with background noise, high enough to maintain navigation stability in winter air. The train continues east, unaware. Its length works against it. Every additional car extends the window of vulnerability. Fuel tankers sit interspersed with covered flatbeds. The locomotive maintains pace, committed to the track, unable to maneuver, unable to stop quickly without disrupting traffic behind it. From above, it is a moving line, predictable, constrained, and exposed. Russian monitoring assets along the corridor registered nothing urgent at first. Rail security protocols assume threats come fast and loud. These do neither. The drones maintain spacing, never clustering, never presenting a single clear signature that would demand immediate classification. Each contact appears insignificant on its own, another weak return among many, easily dismissed in a busy morning picture. As the drones close distance, their behavior changes subtly. One drops lower, skimming closer to terrain. Another adjusts speed by a narrow margin, enough to stagger arrival times without breaking formation logic. This is not improvisation, it is timing. By the time the train reaches a shallow bend in the track near open ground, the approach phase is complete. The drones have matched speed, matched direction, and aligned angles that compress reaction time to seconds rather than minutes. No warning sirens sound, no interceptors launch. The defense still believes it has time. Then the first drone commits, dropping sharply toward the center of the train, not aiming for the engine, but for the cars that turn movement into fire. The others follow on offset paths, closing from different angles, forcing any last-second response to split and hesitate. The strike is no longer about detection. It is about inevitability. The train keeps moving, unaware that the attack has already begun. By 6:02 a.m., the Ukrainian FP2 drones were fully committed. They flew autonomously on pre-programmed waypoints at approximately 180 kilometers per hour, holding altitude between 1,200 and 1,500 meters, as they pushed deeper toward the Russian fuel train moving south at a steady 60 kilometers per hour. The timetable placed the train inside the Dovzansk depot window at 0650 a.m., a margin planners knew would not open again for at least 72 hours. What the Ukrainian operators did not see was how quickly the Russian electronic surveillance layer reacted. The moment the drone's control links lit up the spectrum, their emissions cut through the quiet morning air and fell directly into the listening envelope of two R900 and 34 automated direction-finding vehicles, positioned roughly 45 kilometers apart, one 20 kilometers north of the flight path, the other 25 kilometers northeast. Both swept continuously from 20 megahertzes to 3 gigahertzes, antennas rotating, tuned specifically for UAV signatures. Within 0.3 seconds, the R934 systems classified the signals as hostile. The links were frequency hopping between 1.2 and 1.4 gigahertzes across roughly 50 channels, transmitting at 10 watts, a profile matching Ukrainian FP2 drones rather than Russian systems. Time difference of arrival calculations resolved the drone's position with an error margin under 200 meters, achieved in just 23 seconds from first detection. Those coordinates flowed automatically into a Borisov 2 command truck, acting as a mobile electronic intelligence hub. From there, the firing solution passed directly to a BM-21 Grad battery, positioned 31 kilometers away, operating under standing orders issued in 2022 that required no human confirmation. Once hostile UAVs were identified inside the suppression envelope, at 6:04 a.m., the Grad battery elevated all 40 launch tubes to approximately 52 degrees, compensating for an 8-knot crosswind from the west. The fire control computer finalized a 600 by 600 meter saturation box centered precisely on the drone's last known position. Each 122 millimeters rocket carried 6.4 kilograms of high explosive, with a lethal fragment radius of roughly 30 meters, enough to shred anything flying or standing inside the grid. The Ukrainians heard the launch before they could react. The rising, tearing sound of rockets igniting in sequence echoed across the forest line as 40 projectiles arced skyward at nearly 690 meters per second, timed to impact just over 60 seconds. The drones were still less than 10 kilometers from their launch point, climbing through 1,500 meters. Cutting control too early would send the drones spiraling back toward friendly territory, exposing operators and wasting the strike. Waiting too long risked losing both drones and crews in a single barrage. The team gambled. They held the Lynx alive for exactly 20 more seconds, then switched to autonomous navigation, killed power, and fled. When the blast wave hit their vehicle at roughly 200 meters, fragments punched through the rear panels, but the operators escaped. All 4 FP2 drones survived intact, already beyond the kill box and accelerating southeast toward Dovzansk. Ahead, near Starobilsk, a Tor M2 battery had already begun tracking them. 6:06 a.m. Near Starobilsk, the 4 FP2 drones were still alive, still moving, still pointed at a fuel train that could not turn, could not hide, and could not stop on command. Behind them, the air had already been torn open once. A full BM-21 Grad ripple that tried to erase their launch position in a 600 by 600 meter box. 4 Zero rockets walking the grid in a 6-second storm. It failed. The drones were now autonomous, and that was the problem, because autonomous drones do not panic, they just keep going. On a hilltop above the valley, a Tor M2 battery had been watching since they crossed into range at 38 kilometers. The system looked calm from the outside. One vehicle, a flat radar panel, a crew that barely moved, but its computer was already building a picture 3 times per second. Search, update, refine. 4 faint returns, staggered by altitude and spacing, approaching like a small formation that refused to clump up into an easy target. Inside the Tor cabin, the operator saw the pattern immediately. One contact high at 2,000 meters, straight and level at 180 kilometers per hour, almost too clean to be real. A second at 500 meters, drifting left and right by small margins. Not enough to look like a bird, just enough to make a tracking solution wobble. 2 more, low at 200 meters, using every depression and ridge as cover. The operator could track all 4. Tracking was not the bottleneck. Engagement was. The Tor could only illuminate 4 targets at once with its engagement channels, narrow beams that had to stay on a target from launch to impact. Break that beam for more than 0.5 seconds and the missile lost guidance and self-destructed. The Ukrainian flight profiles were built around that weakness. The low drones were not trying to be invisible. They were trying to be intermittent, appearing and disappearing behind terrain just long enough to snap the beam. Then the spike came. The Tor shifted from broad search pulses to tighter tracking. The illumination rhythm changed, and the drone computers read it like a siren. Both low drones reacted at the same moment, dropping from 200 meters toward 50 meters, scraping cold air over the earth, shrinking their radar signature into a thin line. They were telling the Tor the same message: if you want us, you have to commit. The battery commander did commit, but not in the clean way Doctrine wanted. He had seen this before. High-altitude drones were often bait, trading altitude for being an obvious target. Low drones were usually the real warheads, the ones that lived long enough to matter. He chose ammunition discipline anyway. Ripple fire doctrine, launch 2, watch, then adjust. 2 9M 338 missiles erupted vertically, climbing to a calculated point above the targets before pitching into a dive. They did not chase, they intercepted. Gravity helped. The high drone never moved, never dodged, never even tried. At 5 meters, the proximity fuse triggered. Tungsten fragments expanded outward at extreme speed, and the drone ceased to exist as anything larger than scattered panels. The Tor crew logged a clean kill, but the commander did not celebrate because the straight-flying target had likely been the cheap one. The second pair of missiles went for the middle drone as it tried to drop from 500 meters toward 200. It was too late. The Tor computer was not aiming at where it was aiming at where it would be. The missile arrived at the predicted point, and the mid-altitude drone vanished into a brief flash and a broken telemetry line. 2 down, 2 to go, and the 2 survivors were the ones hugging the Earth with live warheads still armed. A few kilometers east, the landscape changed. A river valley cut 30 meters below the surrounding ground, and at that range, even a modern beam could not bend. The drones dove into that trench, and the operator watched them disappear from his scope, not because the system failed, but because physics enforced a blind spot. Earth curvature, terrain shadow, and a valley that was just deep enough to break line of sight. They did not get through clean. At the western lip of the valley, one drone pulled up hard at the last second. Power lines crossed the cut at about 20 meters. The onboard camera spotted them, a dark lattice against pale winter sky. Either climb or die. The drone climbed to 80 meters, cleared the lines, then dove back down, but that brief pop-up was enough for the Tor to re-grab the track. 2 more missiles launched. The plumes were visible for miles, white smoke that screamed to anyone watching that the air defense was firing again. The drones responded like machines that understood cost. They stopped maneuvering. No weaving, no sudden climbs. They went straight and level, minimizing cross-section, becoming holes in the sky. The missiles arrived and found empty air as the drones vanished into another cut, another ridge, another fold in the ground. The battery commander made the call to reposition. Repositioning a Tor was not a quick pivot. It was a sequence. Lower the radar, lock the chassis, move, stabilize, raise, recalibrate. It took about 4 minutes, and in that 4 minutes, the 2 surviving drones gained 12 kilometers. When the Tor reacquired, they were already near the eastern end of the valley, and they only appeared for seconds at a time. No 6:22 a.m. Both FP2 drones cleared the Tor engagement envelope, not because they were faster, but because they were disciplined, low, and timed. The fuel train was still rolling south at 60 kilometers per hour, committed to its depot schedule, and the drones now had less than 30 minutes to get ahead of the locomotive and strike where it mattered. But the twist was waiting at the destination. 60 kilometers ahead, at the Dovzansk rail depot, a separate Russian system had been parked since midnight, not to shoot drones, but to blind them. The drones had escaped missiles. Now they were about to fly into a wall of noise. If you are still here with me, type the country you are watching from, and if you are listening in the background, do not worry, the drones are doing the hard part for you. 6:30 a.m. Dovzansk rail depot. The 2 surviving FP2 drones did not enter a clean approach. They entered a trap built for exactly this moment. Parked near the fuel transfer line since midnight, an R330ZL jamming system had been running quiet until the last possible window, protecting the depot the way a blanket protects a fire by starving it of oxygen. When it powered up, the air changed instantly. Navigation updates turned unreliable. Control links became a struggle. Even the simple act of holding a stable heading started to cost attention, time, and luck. Without a working satellite fix, the drones fell back on inertial navigation and inertial systems drift. Every minute added about 10 meters of error. After 5 minutes, that was 50 meters off course, enough to miss a tanker car and bury a warhead in gravel. The Ukrainian operators, 180 kilometers away, watched the video feeds collapse under pressure as the jamming intensified. Frame rate dropped from 30 frames per second to 10, then 5. Resolution fell from clear 1080p to smeared 480p. Data packets vanished in bursts, then returned in fragments, like a conversation held through a slammed door. The only reason any of it stayed usable was the directional antennas pointing straight back toward the operators, carrying 18 decibels of gain, about 63 times amplification, and even with most of the stream damaged, enough information still got through to attempt manual control. The first operator fought 3 problems at once. Control lag made every stick input arrive about 400 milliseconds late, like steering on a delay. Frame drops froze the picture for whole seconds, then jumped forward, showing the drone somewhere else entirely. Through the stuttering feed, the fuel train appeared, already inside the depot window, tankers aligned like a row of matches. The operator did not aim for the locomotive. He aimed for the first place fire could multiply. The drone entered a terminal dive and struck a tanker at speed. The initial impact tore open metal, and burning fuel poured along the track bed, pooling under adjacent cars. Heat spread fast. A pressure relief valve, sensing temperatures approaching 200 degrees, opened automatically, venting fuel vapor into the flames. The next valve opened, then another. Within 30 seconds, 5 cars were fully involved, each one feeding roughly 7,200 liters into the inferno, and the depot turned from a logistical node into a bright, uncontrolled burn line. Behind the smoke, the second drone stayed high for a moment, waiting for the fire to settle just enough to reveal what mattered next. If the jammers have not scrambled your screen yet, hit like and subscribe, because the next impact is not aimed at the train. 6:34 a.m. Dovzansk Rail Depot. The first impact had already done the one thing a fuel yard cannot tolerate. It turned the track bed into a moving fire line. Burning fuel ran along ballast, pooled under couplers, and climbed the sides of tanker cars from below. And within minutes, the depot stopped behaving like a logistics node and started behaving like a sealed burn zone. The second FP2 drone had waited above the smoke just long enough to identify the real hinge point, not the locomotive, not the tankers, but the power spine that kept pumps, switches, lights, and communications alive. It dove through heat shimmer, found the substation, and hit hard. The failure was immediate and systemic. Yard lighting dropped in sections, then all at once, signal heads went dark, pump motors stalled, local repeaters degraded. Even the jamming field that had been smothering the drone links flickered and collapsed, not because someone chose to shut it down, but because the electricity feeding it was gone. In under 10 minutes, the timetable that mattered most was erased. The depot window planners had targeted was effectively closed, not by a missed arrival, but by a yard that could not safely move anything in darkness, smoke, and rising heat. At minimum, 5 tanker cars were fully involved, each one feeding roughly 7,200 liters into fire and vapor, around 36,000 liters no longer moving downrange, and every additional minute raised the risk of more venting and secondary ignition. And the strategic message landed behind the flames. Russian direction finding had cued a BM-21 battery. Tor M2 had shot down drones in the approach. Jammers had tried to blind the last kilometers. Yet 2 drones still reached the point the system could not afford to lose, proving the rear is no longer safe just because it is called rear. In this war, the front is not a line. It is a moment, and sometimes it arrives on rails. If you like your updates more reliable than a depot power grid, subscribe and keep your radar tuned right here.